Hey guys, today I'm back in Polybridge, and I wanted to show off a couple different mechanisms to make a nice intro video to my channel. My goal is to make a kinetic bridge level out of my initials. Really that's it though, so let's get right into it. Alright, so I'm starting in sandbox like I normally do, and I'm placing in some platforms. Now these platforms are what I'm actually going to be putting cars on to move around, and then my kinetic bridges are going to walk up and around these platforms. So here I'm just putting a few in to figure out what kind of spacing I would want between the cars and also just for the kinetic bridges themselves. And I try here for 2 meters in between, but it really would make my initials really small. So I go for 4 meters, and this felt about right. So I can get rid of that bridge I had in there just for testing. And now I'm actually putting in an R using the platforms. Here it looks more like an A, but I just gotta extend the tail a bit. So I tried doing that with a 4 meter offset, and this was a bit extreme, so I put it back to 2, and this seemed about right. So now I felt pretty comfortable with this. I extended out the island because I knew I'd need some room for the sea, and I'm putting in some cars, and these cars are actually going to be moving from one side to the other in different ways. They'll be moving up and down a bit too. So after I have all that placed in, I decided to move in some fixed joints, and these fixed joints are going to have some kinetic bridges walk up and down them. Because my first bridge design I have here is a walking bridge. Now to make that I need these 2 guiding arms, and I actually need triangle shapes to do this. Because if I'm rotating over 90 degrees, there's going to be like a pinch point where it can break. But having in those extra arms in the bottom should prevent that from happening. But now I felt pretty comfortable with the shape, so now I'm putting in a hydraulic phase. And after I set a split joint, you see it rotates down. And with the bridge now falling, I wanted to see if I could pull it up. So I'm using a single hydraulic attached to just one split joint. And you see it begins to pull it up, but it has some issues. And I tried a few different hydraulic locations, but nothing seemed to work until I tried this. By putting a hydraulic on the bottom here, as it pulls in, it sort of rotates that parallelogram, or pulls the diagonal of the parallelogram closer together, which expands the other one, which pulls the bridge up like this. Now a single hydraulic wasn't quite up for the task, but I could use a diamond hydraulic, and this allows me to extend a greater distance than before, and now I can pull up almost all the way, and with just a bit of tweaking I can actually get it to go the full distance. And actually overextended a bit, but with a bit of tuning, I can just tone it down a bit. Alright, now with that working, things seem to be going well. There's just one more thing I have to do. At the top, it needs to latch with 2 points so that it can grab, and then the hydraulic can re-expand and push out the extending mechanism again, allowing it to effectively reset. So here I have a second split joint in the top. I'm going to be using that to grab at the top of its motion, as you'll see here, and then it'll push back down, expanding it out. And now it's fully reset, ready to go again. So I can use this alternating pattern of fixed joints to make this work, but I don't quite like the way this looks, to be honest. So it does work, but I think I can do better than this. I don't like having fixed joints just floating in the air because it just looks unnatural. So what I can do is, using a few tricks, I can put them all on that center beam so they at least look like they're anchored by something. And to do this, I just need to fix my wooden supports a bit so that there's 2 directly parallel with the beam. And then I also have to do this similar thing with the extending mechanism. So there's a triangle going out to one of the arms. And there you see it functions the same as before, but all of my fixed joints are on the platform, which is exactly what I want. So stage 2 of this is copying it and just putting it on the other side. The problem is though it's a bit harder than that, because not only does it need to move down 2 meters like the other bridge, it also needs to move back or in 2 meters as well. And this is a bit more tricky than it might seem, because I can't just have the extending arm directly in between the 2 pieces. I need a bit of geometry to make this work the way I would want. So I'm just moving around some checkpoint flags now to get some basic goals set. And here's a trick I learned. By using the trace tool and setting it so that 2 steel pieces have to form, I can create a square like this, and then delete the inside pieces. And now that one point is exactly the rotational point I'm going to need to have that bridge rotate exactly down 4 meters and back 2 meters. So here it's just freely swinging, and you can see it swings directly into those 2 points. Now it might be a little hard to see there because it's moving so fast in Polybridge, well, my frame rate was relatively low, but I think that could work. Now I'm just adding in the C because why not? I also wanted to make sure nothing was going to interfere with that for future plans I had. Next thing I'm doing is adding in that triangle mechanism like I discussed earlier, and this keeps it from pinching at weird points. And it falls the exact same way as before, it just now when it rotates it's a little bit cleaner. So adding in a diamond hydraulic here to get the max distance as I did with the other one, you can see it pulls in, and it actually goes a little bit too far. For this I just need to adjust the hydraulics a little bit to get them to expand not quite as far, or contract not quite as far. And there it locks perfectly into place and actually pushes down the other segment and resets. And that was perfect. And now we're working on what I would consider probably stage 3 of this design. And this is little extensions to the kinetic bridges so that they can push themselves out. Because as this rotates back, these 2 bridges are going to get further and further apart, so I'm going to need little pieces of bridge to sort of bridge the extra gap. There's a lot of bridges in one sentence. So here I have a rotating bridge, and I'm just using one hydraulic to sort of push it out. But now as it rotates down, you can see how it extends out. But now as it rotates down, it actually clips the car and breaks the entire bridge. Now understandably, this is a bit of a problem, So I just have to tell it to expand after it's done reaching its final destination, as you see there. And of course it over-rotates and breaks, so I have to just tune it down a little bit. But there it attaches perfectly, it runs across, and I have more staging errors. So I'm telling that middle car to end up on the bottom, and I'm going to be using a single checkpoint there to tell it to stop on the first kinetic bridge. Now you'll notice a big problem I have is that bridge just walked up again, but I want it to step down. And this, all I have to do is reverse the direction of the split joints breaking. Instead of telling the top ones to break and then the bottom ones to break, I want to tell the bottom ones to break and then the top ones to break. And here you see what the difference looks like. But I still have a one road gap to fix. And I can do this using a single hydraulic on the other bridge, since I don't want to overload that other bridge that has the 2 roads on it. And I struggled hard with this for some reason. And all I had to do is attach a single hydraulic to push out a single piece of road, but this was a bit tricky. And here I had a few issues where when I tried making it, it ended up causing the bridge to just entirely shatter. So I'm using a few different designs. Now I'm using one where I have a triangle piece that I push out, but as it walks up, you see the whole bridge just sort of shatters. And the slow-mo thing I have here, you can see as it walks up, one of the steel beams supporting the bridge just wasn't having it. So I guess the combined weight of the car and that extra road might have been too much. So I'm using a single steel muscle to support the weight, and this works, but it still has a flashpoint on that hydraulic. So all I did was adjust that triangle to push it to the other side, and now it contracts, and you can see how it pulls in, and that lifts up the road, which causes it to work. But I still have a third car up there, as you see, that just plummeted on the bottom bridge. Now the car drives across fine at the bottom, but for some reason the right bridge was having so many problems where it just kept breaking. And after a few adjustments, you can see it just keeps falling apart there. And I was pretty baffled by this for a while until I realized it's just that it's too heavy. And every time it tried to get up, it would just not quite reach the correct split joints and it would fall down. So just dropping the 2 roads that are there worked. I'm not happy with that solution entirely. I mean, it works, which is good, and you see the top car gets across and everything's fine. But I wish I had a way to either pick it up or use it in a separate part of the bridge. I might revisit this at some point, and if I do, that'd be one of the things I would fix. And now with that bottom section complete to a point where I thought it was good enough, I wanted to try this top section. And this can use a very similar mechanism to the left bridge in the bottom, actually 2 of them. And these are just going to work in union since I basically have 6 platforms on each side that I need to get cars between, and they could just move up and down as they'll need to. And since this is similar to something I've already described, I don't want to spoil too much what I'm going to do with it, so you can see where the cars end up in my final design. Alright, and now I'm focusing on the area between the top of the R and the top of the C. Alright, and now I'm just putting in the 5 roads as I normally do and having a basic wooden truss system. And I'm using some steel guiding arms here. Now, it looks like a lot happened between cuts, but all I have is 2 guiding arms. I'm adding in 2 triangles here to do the same thing I had before, which is the reinforced parallelogram setup. I also have a hydraulic chain on top. This isn't going to be part of the final design, it's just to temporarily test how it pulls up. So you can see how the movement of the bridge looks. But those hydraulics and the supports on top are all going to be gone because they aren't actually going to be included in the final design since they can't really walk with the bridge. But adding in a few steel triangles just to get the basic setup right, I had problems with it breaking a lot, but I pressed on because I thought it might be manageable. So I'm just connecting them together with a few more steel muscles, and you see it can pull itself up, and this is a very similar design as the one from down before with the diamond hydraulic pushing and then contracting to make it all work. But I had a lot of problems where it just wanted to, I guess, explode for lack of a better word on itself. So I thought I might be able to overcome this with a few different things, and they somewhat worked, but the easiest solution was to make the left side symmetrical to the right side. You can see how the triangles are now the exact same size. And this fixed a lot of my problems, and there you see it walked up 1 step, just like the other bridges do. So this is exactly what I want, and again, I set up some checkpoints and where the cars are going to be, but I don't want to spoil it for the end, since it's just a lot of different staging options. And this is the final mechanism I want to show off. Well, I guess the second one, but also the final one. It's going to be a scissor mechanism, and I've seen these before, but I've never actually been able to use one myself. And they actually work, they're pretty simple. One of the legs is going to be fixed jointed to the platform setup, and the other leg is going to be on some sort of slider mechanism. Now I'm using an arm here as a linear approximation mechanism, so it can slide side to side. It does dip down a little bit because it's tracing the arc of the circle, but I'm using such a small piece of the arc that it ends up being effectively linear. So I just have to use a single hydraulic to pull in and push out. And you can see at the top of the scissor mechanism moves up and down. But the real great thing about the scissor mechanism is you can stack them like I did here. So right now I have 3 mechanisms stacked, and as the hydraulic pulls in, it moves up a full 4 meters. So with that movement looking pretty solid, I thought it was time to add in some roads. And these roads are, well, going to lift up and down the car, and actually have this mechanism do something productive. but it's not quite strong enough to hold the roads, and this is going to be a big problem for a while. But here I just had to reinforce those bottom 2 pieces, and you can see it lifts up the roads from the one platform all the way up to the other, which is exactly what I want. So it's time to add in a bottom platform to allow a car to drive out onto it so that the scissor mechanism can push it up. And now I'm adding in one on top of it, and this second one is actually going to be temporary because I want a second scissor mechanism that's going to be pulling up. But just to give me a basic idea of where the scissor mechanism is going to be pulling, and it looked like it lined up about right. So now I can have the car try to get on it, and it completely shatters, because of course it does. So I reinforced like literally every single linkage in the bottom scissor mechanism and a few in the second one just to get this to work. But it did eventually work. So after all the reinforcements, I get it working to a state where I feel happy enough with it. So I want to add in that second scissor mechanism like I was discussing before. And this is pretty simple. I just have to change up the carriage a little bit because now gravity is working in the opposite direction relative to how the scissor mechanism is. So after just flipping it around, you can see they push up and they actually meet in just about the right spot. And the car can get on it, so that's a good thing. But I do want the car to stop on the second scissor mechanism and then to get lifted up by it. But this is where the start of my problems occurred, because these mechanisms are swinging back and forth, as you can see. And this is because of the way they have to get supported by moving joints. I have to use swings, and I don't like it, but using some springs ends up helping the stability just a little bit. And I have a very odd problem here, where the second scissor mechanism doesn't pull up all the way to the full distance it originally came from. And I think this is because the hydraulic ends up getting pulled a little bit by the amount of leverage in the scissor mechanism, making it not quite get to the full distance it started at. And this led me to one of the weirdest applications of a diamond hydraulic I've ever had. Now here I wanted the diamond hydraulic to contract when it gets pulled down. And to do that, you would want all the outside legs to be contracting and the inner leg to be expanding. And this gives you the optimal contracting distance. But here I want to do something different where I have all of them contracting. And this leads to a state where in the initial state, it starts out not fully contracted. So this allows me to expand out and catch the car on the bottom. And then by pulling in that center hydraulic, I end up contracting the hydraulic a further distance than it initially came from, pulling it up a further distance from where it came from, making it finish further up from where it started, which solves the problem of it ending up a little bit lower. Now if that was confusing, I don't blame you because that took me a few hours to end up figuring out, and I hope some of these visuals ended up helping. Well guys, thanks for watching. This video is a bit odd for me as I didn't really have an end goal besides just making a cool level using my initials, but I kind of wanted to do that because I wanted to show off a few different mechanisms such as the scissor mechanism and the walking bridge, and also experiment a bit with what I had. So if you liked what you see, consider subscribing, maybe even like the video. I would like if you liked the video. But otherwise, yeah, until next time.